Good afternoon and welcome to Coffee with Alain. We're a little bit later today and you'll know why here in a second. But I want to remind you right at the front, because I might forget to later, go to enjoylifesafely.com. You can get all the back episodes, video or audio, of Coffee with Alain, as well as some free resources to help you stay safe, enjoy life, and be exceptional. You know, I'm drinking out of a Life is Good mug here. You can see Rocky and me on the cup. Rocky and I got to go out on our hike this morning, see a moose. We hadn't seen a moose for a while. And obviously the moose is quite a bit bigger than Rocky, and he didn't really know what to do with something that big. It wasn't a squirrel to go chasing. So we let the moose run up the hill, and then we went on our hike. It's always nice to see them, whether it's bear or moose or anything else, from a distance, and let them go their way. You go your way. Don't be an idiot like some of these people that think they can go pet a bison, or some of the people that do that. But the other reason I had Life is Good mug is because life is good, because we have a special guest on Coffee with Alain today, and that's why we went in the afternoon instead of the morning. Want to invite Dan Anderson, who, if you're a martial artist, you know who Dan is. If you're not a longtime martial artist, I'm going to let Dan tell us a little bit about himself, just for those that might not know his backstory. Although, like I said, martial artists tuning in will definitely know the name and know some of that history. Dan, if you could introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. So, as Alan said, I'm Dan Anderson. My nickname back when I was competing back in the ancient days was Super Dan. And I was the first karate guy on the circuit to actually have a nickname. So this was even before Bill Superfoot Wallace or Howard Jackson, the California Flash, etc. And I did quite well in karate tournament fighting, and both in the days when we were bare knuckle, and then the incipient days of the of the fighting pads. And then, as well as my karate career, what I've done is I've done extensive training in a Filipino martial art called modern arnis. That was the art that was propagated by the late Remy Presses. And so been involved for, it'll be 58 years this November. Yes, 58. I look at that and I blink and I go, oh my, the time certainly has gone by. But fundamentally, that's who I am, and I welcome any and all questions, comments, etc. Just go ahead and type them in, and I'm pretty much an open book. So if you have anything to ask away. I'm here.
Thank you, Dan. And something I was going to talk to you about last time you were on the show and we didn't have time. You know, if you remember, I held up a book by Chris Wilder and Lawrence Kane, the Dakota, which you did the foreword and I did some chapters on it. And that was sort of a connection we had.
Yeah.
Well, we have another connection that I found on the bookshelf.
Oh, really?
And that's Fighter's Fact Book 2.
Ah, yeah.
I did a chapter on kicking, and you did a chapter on using an impact tool for self-defense.
Yes. Yes.
So we both contributed to this book. And while I have known of Lawrence since the 80s, reading his magazines, and then his articles, and then his books, and then I got a chance to know him and meet him after I became a Paladin author, you have known him and trained with him much, much more. I would like you to talk a little bit about Lauren and about that relationship you had with him.
Well, I started with him from day one. And, back in November 1966, Vancouver, Washington didn't have a dojo. What we had is we had two instructors. We had Lauren and his buddy Mike, who were teaching at the Martial Recreation Center. And so that's where I met Lauren. He was, I have to remember the age difference between us. So I think he was roughly 19 years old or so. He was a green belt, very husky. He trained us very, very hard, and he even trained harder than we did. So, I mean, he was dripping sweat when we were done. But the thing that impressed me about Lauren right off the bat was when I went to the class, I went there because there was a friend of mine who was a blue belt from him. And when he told me the class time, either A, he told me his class time, and I thought that was the beginner time, or it slipped his mind. He gave the wrong time, or whatever. The primary thing was I was an hour late for the beginner's class. And now Lauren, he could have done one of two things. He could have done the come back. I'm sorry, you're an hour late. The beginner's class is over with. Come back next class. We'll get you going. Or, and this is what he did, was he pulled over one of his blue belts, Tony Leonetti, and he said, his kid showed up late, show him some stuff. And so my very first lesson was actually one of his blue belts. But the thing that impressed me was, Lauren could very easily have done a W.C. Fields thing. Go away, boy, you bother me. But he didn't, so from there, I was obsessed. I came in, I trained hard. I remember one time I asked him if I could do the beginner's class and the intermediate class. And he, in his words later, reluctantly agreed. And then later on there, I asked him if I could do the beginners, intermediate, and advanced class. Well, by this time, he saw how hard of a worker that I was. And so he allowed me to do that class as well. Skill-wise, I was not up for it, but I had more than enough energy, more than enough interest to, for him to kind of go, okay, I'll sign off on this. Let's have you do this. Now, an interesting thing is that, continuing in the relationship, he was my teacher, he was my idol, he was my role model, etc. In, I believe, 1969, he goes into the service and he becomes a military policeman in Saigon. And I happen to get his address, I believe, from his parents. And I write him a letter now, and I ask him about self-defense techniques as a cop and so forth. And he is very, very surprised that I wrote. Very pleased, surprised, but he's surprised. So he wrote me back. So we started writing back and forth. In fact, I found just recently the only letter that I got from, the only letter that I kept. I really wish I had that first one. But the only letter that I still had on record of him sending from Japan, and the last time I visited him, it was like, here you go for the archives. But he came back. When he came back, he left as a brown belt, came back as a brown belt, a very street seasoned brown belt. But I'd been promoted to black at that time. So within a week of him coming back, bam, I'm over to his place and we're training. Now, he always complains that I broke his rib with a sidekick. And I probably did. I was pretty exuberant at the time. But he also took some pictures that I posted recently up on Facebook. And ever since then, ever since then, we've been close. We've been buddies. We haven't been, let's say, student-teacher relationship, although I will always think of him as sensei. I will always think of him as, my higher up, the guy that I looked up to. And I got to be able to do a payback to him. And this was really, really special because, oh boy, I think it was either 5 or 7 years ago, something like that. I was promoted to 10th Dan by Mr. Alain Steen. And it was, I think, a couple of years ago when I wrote Mr. Steen and the board of the AKBBA. I'm trying to think what not a dissertation, but a presentation of sorts. Why I would like to see Lauren promoted as 10th Dan and his accomplishments in what he's done over the years. And the fascinating thing is, this green belt that I met has become one of the most prolific authors in the martial arts. He is incredibly highly regarded in the real deal world. I've got real deal buddies who they'll just be utterly surprised when I tell them he's my first teacher. The Lauren Christensen. I remember when Brian Zawolinsky came out and he said, one special request, you got to introduce me to Lauren. I said, Z, not a problem. And so anyway, going back to the 10th Dan, is it got okayed by Mr. Steen. I got the certificate, and only when I found out that it was okayed did I even let him know I was doing something behind his back. And I call and see, the thing is if you know anything about Lauren, hey Jeff, how you doing? If you know anything about Lauren, the guy is not a numbers chaser. The guy's real deal. The guy wants A, to know it works, B, not only know it works, but how to keep his body going. And it surprised me recently because he was older than I thought. He was 78. And I'll be 72 in November, so he's got 6 up on me. And so these are his interests, right? Don ranks, okay, yeah, that's all nice and fine. I called him up. It was pretty funny. He said, so, Lauren, I just have to let you know that I just went behind your back on something, and hear me out. And then I told, I wrote Mr. Steen and this and that, and I said, yeah, you're going to be promoted to 10th Dan. And he was quiet on the phone, and then very softly answered thanks. And when I got the certificate, that's when we did actually a Facebook presentation. And that was, straight to the heart to be able to hand him that certificate, something which I felt that he so deserved. But, kind of a payback for that very first lesson when he didn't turn me away and had somebody else work with me in the class. So yeah, Lauren and I, the highest respect for each other, friends enough that we can just bull bait each other like nobody's business. You see some of our texts and emails going back and forth. You'd think that we didn't like each other. And it's kind of one of those where, you can love somebody so much that you can just call them a flippin' nutcase and they'll come back with a rejoinder instead of getting insulted. So that's a thumbnail of me and Lauren.
I want to make a couple comments on that. And I want to say hi to Jeff too. Thanks for coming here, Jeff. Jeff's Han Do under Hae-Young Kim. Dr. Hae-Young Kim
okay.
is one of his instructors. So
cool.
His art. But a couple things. One, when you said how you went back to the different classes, it reminded me of when I was living in Korea. My instructor taught 3 classes in the evening, afternoon, evening, and 1 early in the morning. The last 2 classes I couldn't go to because I was working. I taught at night, an English class. That's how I was paying the bills to live in Korea. So
okay.
So when I got introduced to the school, I could go to that first class in the afternoon. And I went for about a week. And then I learned about that early morning class. I was like, can I go to that class? And the instructor's like, sure. And I said, and the afternoon. He's like, 2? I said, yes. He's like, okay. So I went to 2 classes, and then I started going to a Qigong class in between those, because the Kwanjungnim also had that class that my main Hapkido instructor, which was his top student who did most Hapkido instruction, he went to that, but everybody else was pretty much very old. So I went to those 3 classes a day and then 1 class on Saturday. But I was going to 11 Hapkido classes a week. And then I would go back later after, I was a black belt, and I'd go back to visit and do stuff. And I'd have Korean students come up. You, the American, go 2 times a day. So I'm sure my instructor was at times saying, you missed class? The American used to come twice a day and didn't miss class. But I get that, wanting to go to more classes a day.
Oh yeah. I could, we're looking at 1966, so it was very, very exotic. It was not something that, people have a wide variety of choices, not only of different sports. You got your soccer and you got your baseball and football, et cetera, but a fairly wide variety of martial choices. So you've got the proliferation of the BJJ schools, you've got Kung Fu schools, karate, taekwondo, tang sudo, Kempo karate, Hapkido, etc. So you've got this buffet that you can cherry pick from. Back then, it was the only game in town, and it was a very exotic one. And first lesson, I fell totally in love.
And another interesting thing I just wanted to share, and I'm going to ask you another question about Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 80s, when I was competing in judo, I got choked unconscious in one of the tournaments.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, like all of us think,
I've got a funny choke story when you tell me about it later. It's like really embarrassing, but go ahead, continue.
But when you're going out, you're thinking there's not anything I can do. I mean, it's like, and so I had that feeling. And at the same time, I read a magazine article about chokes and sleepers for real applications in one of the mini martial art magazines back then. And I just got where I wanted to get good at those. And I did. And then when I was in the military, and then after the military, I used chokes and sleeper holds and put a number of guys out.
Wow.
And actually the last time I got physical with a person, which has been 5 or 6 years ago now, when I was still working security, I was at a concert and had this big giant drunk guy go berserk. And I hit him, spun him, and dropped him down and put a chokehold on him. I did not put him unconscious, and usually I didn't. Usually I just get him woozy till the fight was out of him, and so I've used those chokes and sleepers effectively throughout my career of working and being young and stupid and fighting. Then I found, during this time, I became an author with Paladin. I met Lauren, got the relationship, been in his books, got to meet him in Portland, went out to eat and all this kind of stuff. Then after that, I found an old box that my dad had in his place and gave to me. And that had a bunch of old martial art magazines from high school. And I found that Chokes and Sleeper article, and Lauren was the author of that. And I had to joke with him about it. It's like, wow, you were the one that set me on the Chokes and Sleeper path.
Yep. Yeah. It's before you asked me the question about Laura, I told you I had a funny story about sleepers. I was doing a video for my students, and it was basically defense against the front choke.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got Ashley. She's a surgeon now, so she was like one of these like real, in terms of life, a real laser head. When she was a kid, she knew she wanted to be a medical doctor. She wanted to be a surgeon, and that was it. And everything revolved around that. And just, incredible drive. Anyway, so we're videoing a self-defense technique, front choke. And I said, well, just go ahead and dig it hard while I'm talking to the camera, because I'm telling the students via the camera that, there's nothing to be afraid of from a front choke that comes in, to the windpipe, because you've got a good 30 seconds. You've got all the time in the world. It's just uncomfortable as all get out. And for some reason, she wasn't squeezing her thumbs very tight in here. Well, I'm talking into the camera, and then my words start slurring a little bit, and then my knees start getting shaky, and I look at her and say, "You bleep. You're doing a sleeper." And my knees buckled again, and she's laughing nervously, and she goes, I and she told me later that, when she did a little bit of MMA in college, that's exactly what she was taught. Grab here, roll those knuckles in, and I didn't recognize it. And it was one of those, and she was so worried I would get pissed off. And I just thought, this is heavy humor. I'm here and she's choking me down, and I'm the big professor, but I didn't realize it at the Anyway, you're going to ask me another question about Lauren.
Yeah, and Jeff actually says back in the 80s he did Kyokushinkai before he converted to Hanmudo, which was
okay.
Different. Yeah, with definitely a little bit different kind of styles there.
I tell you, the Kyokushin guys, even the weenies are tough. Kyokushin is a rugged system of
they're hardcore.
Criminy sakes, hardcore, whipping on the legs, just full power shots into the body. Yeah. Just Jeff, I'm glad you survived it. Anyway,
moving over to Hanmudo, where part of Dr. Kim's philosophy is to keep you healthy so you can keep doing it. And he's in his 80s. I think he's pushing 85 maybe. And he was, I was at an event a couple of months ago where he was teaching.
Good for him.
Jeff was at that event too. That's, I know Jeff through that event, but we were both there, and I taught, which I'm in my 50s teaching, thinking, oh, I'm getting up there. Dan Severn, he's in his 70s saying, oh, I'm getting up, or not in his 60s. I think he's almost 70, saying I'm getting up there. And here Dr. Kim is up in his 80s, still going strong.
Oh boy. I just saw a recent clip of Guru Dan Inosanto and doing something. 88. It's like, so that's my goal. I want to be like Guru. I want to grow up to be like Guru Dan.
Yep.
Still mobile, still moving, within whatever capacity at 88. I think that's a good starting goal. We'll go from there when we hit 88.
That is, yep.
Yeah, yeah.
What I was going to ask is, I mean, like I've seen Lauren's caveman picture. I mean, from the commercial, you know that one stuff.
Yeah.
What's something funny that you could share? What's a humorous story of the time you and Lauren?
Lauren had a very dry sense of humor. And I remember, and I've told this story to other people, but I had learned spinning back kick from Black Belt magazine. Chuck Norris was doing a technique of the week. It was really high tech stuff. Fake backhand chop. The guy goes for a high block. You spin around and ping, hit him with a back kick while his arm's up still high. And so I got the magazine. I'm working at home. Prop boom, prop boom, prop boom. I've got a funnier story in a moment. But anyway, so I go to the school. I demonstrate it to him, right? And I look at him and say, is this how it goes? And there was just a split-second lag, and he gives this kind of little gleam in his eye, and he goes, yeah, something like that. Later on, I can tell he'd never seen the damn thing before, but he was putting me on. But right at the beginning of the story, and this will tell you about how ready for the Kool-Aid that I was at the time. I had never seen a black belt, so black belts were mythical. They were stuff of legend, and especially if you never seen one back in 1966, you could imbue them with Chinese martial arts movie powers. I like that. So we were talking about kata, and we did the Korean versions of the Shotokan kata. So the Heian katas were called Pyongan. And I asked him, how fast or how good was Bruce? And he goes, well, Bruce can jump up in the air and perform all of Pyongan 4 before he lands on his feet. And I'm like, wow. Of course, now Pyongan 4 has got, I don't know, 25, 26 moves in it. And I'm like, oh, whoa. And he would pull stuff like that. I mean, he knew I had a leg to pull, and man, he just kept pulling. That's the one that comes to mind right at the moment. But the guy's got just a sly sense of humor, very, very good natured. I would hate to get on the wrong side of him, especially in the physicality, because definitely knows his stuff.
He does, and he worked on fitness a lot too. I mean, he was a good size guy and a strong person. I mean, with so it wasn't just knowing martial arts; he had the physicality behind it too.
Yes, yeah, he did. And it's funny because this is where he and I part in our own particular paths. Okay. He was not only into, the street effectiveness and then development of the techniques, he was also into building the body into probably the best health machine and best fighting machine. So he lifted weights, he did high reps. I cannot remember whether he ran or not, but it would not surprise me. I would work on technique and application by the hour. It was not uncommon to see me off to the side doing head high, slow motion kicks in such a manner that would bore anybody else to absolute tears. But this was the thing that I was into, and then sparring, hours on hours, going through partners, spar this one guy until he's red faced, huffy puffy, good, you're next, bing, 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 just rattle through people. And so the differences in the ways that we trained, we went, paid off for both of us. But yeah, he was big, he was strong, and then he had the precision technique behind it, and then he had the experience behind it. I mean, we're talking a nasty combination to mess with. And luckily, good-natured, so he's not, like the hard guy, bully, brute, caveman thing. But yeah, Yeah, no, very remarkable guy. And
Yeah, I mean, very giving. I mean,
yes,
very generous and giving.
yeah, very much so. Very much so.
You know, you've talked a little bit, and we talked a little bit about last time you were on, you know, your competition days. And
Hmm.
obviously, there was a difference back then in the 70s when you were competing, you know, with the likes of Howard Jackson and Chuck Norris and Alan Steen, you mentioned, and a lot of these other greats. It was a different time, a little bit different era, just a different feel about it. And I wasn't there competing, but I've watched videos and I've read and I've talked to some of those people that, like you and others that have been there. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to have, you know, talks with some of these people even before they passed away.
Hmm.
What are some of the things that you really remember about that competition era and some of the best fighters that you either watched or fought against?
Uh-oh. I'm going to end up talking for a long time then. Uh, okay, so I think one of the main differences between competition then and competition now is that back then the concept was that any scoring technique had to have enough juice behind it to either momentarily stop, stun, or knock out or incapacitate your opponent. But it had to be pulled back just enough so that the impact wasn't incapacitating. Now, that also all depends on the region that you're in, because the late Ed Parker has stated a point in Texas is first degree murder in California. So it all depends on where you're fighting. But what you had to do was you had to hone your technique so that you had the speed impact, you had the power, you had the the speed retraction on kicks, so that you could deliver that impact instead of, let's say, a dull thud and down. And when you had that, an interesting aspect of point competition was that you had less what I call shenanigans. You had less comedy in the ring, meaning you had less second punching. You know, the referee calls break, pow, they hit you, because there was always payback. You know, somebody decided to up the degree of contact. Okay, you knew there was payback. And especially when you got the top guys like Jeff Smith and Howard Jackson and Bill Wallace and so forth, uh, yeah, they did not suffer any fools. And these days, what you get is you've got, I think, the same things what you see in MMA, and I'll explain here. Back in '94, Ultimate Fighting Championships was style against style. So you could readily tell, okay, this guy was a karate guy, that guy was a jiu-jitsu guy, the big guy was in sumo, or. And then as it progressed through the last 30 years, okay, 94, 24, okay, what we have is we have a homogenized type of fighting. And no good, no bad. This is just what it's evolved into. Now, American point karate has done the same thing, to where what you'll see is both players will be sideways. Lead hand will be either forwards or slightly down. They will both be going ding, 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 bouncing. Then you'll see the double, triple round kick, pakata, 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 and the guy will either move backwards or to the side, or they'll come in with a dive punch, and the guy will jump up and do a back knuckle to the top of the head, etc. And because of the homogenization of the fighting style, coupled with the rules, and I'll talk about the rules here in a half second, what you get is you get a sameness of fighters. Okay. Now, the plus points, the agility is brilliant. The timing is brilliant. The body coordination, etc. Brilliant. Okay, the cons. Where's, in the words of the late Clara Peller from the Wendy's commercial, where's the beef? Where's the thumpity thump? And I see people hitting and pasting each other and so forth, and the other guy is not only standing, but he's not complaining. It's like, in the words of Groucho Marx, what's the meaning of this outrage? So, yeah. And what's happened, this is my opinion, is that in 1979-ish or 80, the rules in point karate began to change. First thing that was taken out was the groin kick. Well, what is the groin kick? What does it do? Well, it keeps kickers very honest. It also levels out the playing field. You get somebody like Steve Fisher, shorter than myself, a heavyweight, not a high kicker. Okay, good. He was great at underkicks. You pick that knee up, he'd pop you underneath. Well, you take that away from his game. The next thing is you couldn't punch in the back. Okay. And then the next thing is you couldn't sweep out both legs and hit the guy on the ground. You could sweep boot to boot, front leg to front leg, but you couldn't cut both legs out. And it ended up restricting the parameters so that you get a type of fighter being developed. And so in American Point Karate and WKF, the Japanese style, they are both insanely homogenized. And so what you get is you get one type of fighter as opposed to fighters with different styles. Okay, we'll go back to 1970 and 1980. Steve Fisher, short, very smart, very tough. He would use the low kick and counter punches and so forth. Okay, Larry Kelly barely used his hands, always kicking. Keith Vitale, good mix between a kicker and puncher, predominantly right side forward. Everybody looked at him as a defensive player. No, actually, he was one of the best offensive players because if he was down a point or it was overtime, he would score. And he wouldn't be scoring defensively. He'd get the match over with quickly. John Longstreet, okay. Left side, right side, both hands and feet, equal balance. So in boxing, they'll say styles make fights. Okay. So you get, let's say, Keith Vitale, the Iceman, so to speak. Ray McCallum, okay. The center, the core of the sun. Okay, we have two different fighting styles. We have excitement because the players are playing a certain type of thing. Oh, the other thing on the rules is that changing from head kicks to 2 points, I think jump kicks to 3 points. So now the puncher was even at more of a disadvantage because if he's only punching and the guy goes 2 point head kick, it's like, good luck. And so anyway, these days, and this is just my think on it, but I think the excitement comes from you like this guy or you like that guy rather than the match itself being very, very exciting because you have two different fighters. It's almost like the difference in watching boxing today. I don't know if there's any more exciting matchups like the third Ali Fraser or Ali Foreman. I mean, we're talking two different fighting styles. Now, that's where I come from in terms of the difference in competition then and the difference in competition now. I don't go to the major tournaments now, so there's one thing that I cannot comment on with any authority, and that is the camaraderie amongst the top players. I know back when I was fighting, the camaraderie amongst the top players was very high. In fact, there's just a goofy little story I'll tell you that I mean really epitomizes it, and that's fighting in I think Massachusetts. Mike Wolmerhauser and was putting on a tournament. He had a number of the East Coast guys, but he had a couple of West Coast and Midwest guys. And Jimmy Tavares from Houston, Texas. You talk about exciting fighter. Guy was like 5'2". And he would come at you like he was shot from a cannon. And of course, he was a Texan, so he tough as nails. Anyway, Jimmy and I, we fought for, I believe, either the lightweight title or something like that. And I barely edged him out. Now, Jimmy and I were rivals in the lightweight division. I mean, every time we fought, you'd have sworn somebody had either insulted the other one's girlfriend, or we owed each other lots of money and nobody was coughing up. Well, so we're hanging out later on, and we're all at some local bar. We're drinking beers, and Jamie and I are both at the jukebox, right? And we're picking songs, and of all things, what do both of us pick? The Muppets, Rainbow Connection. We plug in the chord or whatever, and we're both singing along. And I mean, we just came an hour and a half ago from beating the living daylights out of each other. But this was the feeling of those guys back then. What it is these days, I'd have to have somebody educate me on it. But I have not read anything about, Mid-America grand champion of 2024, Henry Hank, was out on the town with his rivals, and man, they were just tearing up the joint and having a grand old time. I haven't read anything like that. So maybe the camaraderie is there. But I tell you, back in the 80s, the camaraderie was terrific. And the mentorship of the guys back in the 70s was, I mean, you talk about Lauren. Lauren's giving. Well, so was Howard Jackson. So was Bill Wallace. So was Jeff Smith. So was John Natividad. So was, insert your favorite name here, because they were all willing to pass it on. And is that prevalent today? Don't know. I haven't been to the battle for several years, and I haven't been to the Diamond Nationals. I haven't been to the Internationals. And if it is, excellent. If it's not, that's too bad, because that's something that I really enjoyed back in those days.
Did you ever fight against Howard, or did you watch him fight?
I had the extreme misfortune of fighting Howard Jackson twice. And I laugh when I say that, because Howard, I miss that guy. He passed away from cancer a number of years ago. Yep. And it's funny because everybody would talk about Steve Anderson, Nasty Anderson, and how quick his blitz was. I fought both of them. Nasty was waist deep in mud compared to Howard. Howard was that quick. I remember the 1974 Internationals. Jeff Smith takes me aside. He says, "Dan, you can hit him. You can hit it. You can pick him off. You can hit him with a sidekick as he comes in, because he comes in, he charges. He's got that punch that's up, leaves the body open. Okay, good. I'm ready for him. We match off. He takes off. I pick up for that sidekick. He's in so quick that he jams it at his hip, and he punches me. And he kept jamming my damn kick. Now, I was quick. I was this little guy. I was quick. I had a great sidekick. Howard had a better takeoff. So only extreme displeasure in the fact that I lost to him, but terrific memory, because the guy was such a wonderful gentleman, and his control was just he'd kiss you those punches and he'd be coming fast. And it was just, same thing with working with Bill Wallace. Now, I came this close to fighting Bill Wallace for the championships, grand championships at the 63 U.S. championships. Came very close. Didn't happen. But I trained with him a couple of times. And you talk about somebody with accuracy and extremely great control, kiss contact. Just so, I mean, there's a number of guys that I fought. Some I did well against, some I didn't do well against. Who I would term the legends, it was on my way up. So it would be, let's say, the difference between a top 20 player and a top 10 player. And so the way that I describe it, I was second echelon. I was the guy you had to go through to get to the finals. And that would be from 11 down to 20. You had to get past me. If you got past me, you're getting in the finals. That was in my top 20 days. And unfortunately, there was a number of people that got through me. But great experience, because that set me up very, very well for my top 10 days later on.
No, that's awesome. I had a chance to meet Howard once. We may have talked about it, but it was funny because it was at a book signing of Chuck Norris's.
He
I
he
was
was
down.
probably Chuck's bodyguard at that time, I would
He
think.
was. He
Yeah,
was. He
yeah,
was traveling with, they were friends. And but it was funny because we were down in Southern California, and it's like I met my sisters, and it's like, wow, Chuck Norris is going to be at the mall signing books 2 miles away. Watch our daughter, my wife and I, we headed over to the mall, and we're in line to get the book signed, and I'm like, that's Howard Jackson. And my wife's like, huh? I said, the guy just, and nobody, I was the only one in the entire room that recognized who he was, because most of these
oh,
people were TV fans, not martial artists. I
yes,
was like,
Walker, Texas Ranger. Yep.
no, the guy standing over there by Chuck Norris's table, that's Howard Jackson. He is a fantastic martial artist. And I looked through the book, and in the picture section of Chuck's book, there were a couple pictures of him and Howard.
Yeah.
And so after Chuck signed the book, I went over and introduced myself to Howard Jackson, and I asked him to sign the picture on the inside of the book. And
Oh, sweet.
and then we just sat and talked martial artists until the crowd was gone, and then went back over to talk to Chuck a little bit more when everybody was gone. And
Yeah.
so it was a really cool experience. And that, fast forward to like 2019, Howard had passed away of cancer. I'm at the SHOT Show working with Reflex Protect, the company I work with.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Norris was there with Glock. And they had big lines to meet him and shake hands and take pictures. I was working. I couldn't go get in line 5 hours early to stand in line to say hi. So
Yeah.
I was over there when it was just about done, and they were going to usher him away. And I contacted Gina, and I said, I wanted to mention something to Chuck about Howard. And she goes, Howard Jackson? I said, yeah. She goes, okay. So he gets done. They stand up, and the people are going to usher him out of the crowd. And Gina's like, you need to go talk to that guy. And so he came over, and everybody's wondering, like, who's this guy? And I told him the story. I said, one of my favorite books you signed, but Howard signed it too. And I have both your signatures in that book. And as soon as I said Howard Jackson, he lit up, because they were great friends. And so we started talking about the fighting and how Howard Jackson was a great fighter. And we're talking, and the crowd's looking at us both like, who the and so it was just pretty cool, that I got a chance to talk with Howard that time. And then it came back around a different time when Chuck was at the SHOT Show. And so
Yeah. Now Howard was pure gold. He was, in fact, it was was it Sam Alred's tournament? He won against me for the first place in lightweight division in either Albuquerque or Phoenix. I can't remember. I think it was Albuquerque at Sam Alred's tournament. And Official Karate had the first place and second place reversed. So first place, Dan Anderson, second place, Howard Jackson. And he comes up to me, and he wants me to know that he is not upset about their mistake. And that what he remembers about me was I made a comment in, it might have been Professional Karate Magazine or whatever, and I said something to the effect of, watch out for Howard Jackson. He is going to be making a name for himself. That's what he remembered, and that's what established our relationship. And I remember he was in Portland, Oregon he was doing bodyguard for some sort of entertainment group. I can't remember who it was, but he tagged with me, and we actually met afterwards. I think he and I and Fred King went out, had a beer and just talked about old times and so forth. And that was the last time I physically saw him. But he's one of those guys, and it's a short list of people who all you have to do is say their name, and inside I smile. He and Steve Fisher both come to mind on just wonderful, wonderful human beings, aside from being terrific fighters, just wonderful people. And I was always happy that he had stuck around with Chuck for so long, because Chuck had a number of people splinter off and do their thing, but Howard was definitely one of them, who was side by side. There's another fellow. I think he's in Idaho now. I think. But young man by the name of, young man to me, Chip Wright. Chip was, I can't remember if he was originally a Gresham kid, but when his teacher Bob Barrow established a school down in Medford, Oregon, Chip was all-star athlete, tremendous fighter. If he was 6 foot tall, he would have ruled the galaxy. He was short and just phenomenal. Gave me fits every time we fought. But he was a person who was just, side by side with Chuck the entire time. In fact, if you watch Walker, Texas Ranger, if you see somebody throwing a spinning back crescent kick, that's Chuck. All the other cool stuff, that's Chip. I can tell by his body motion, that's Chip. And with his very close cropped beard and the haircut, at a fast glance, he looks like Chuck. He looks a lot like Chuck. So, but those are two individuals who stuck by Chuck Norris, and for the duration, stuck by him for the duration, which is really, really cool. So, but yeah, I'm glad you got a chance to meet and talk with Howard, because he was one of what I call the triumvirate, because during my top 20 days, you had 3 different fighters who on any given day would win it. And if all 3 fighters were there at the same tournament, who the heck would win it? Bill Wallace, Jeff Smith, Howard Jackson. And in almost any era, you get one dominant player. Back when Mr. Steen in 65 at the International Karate Championships, figure this, he beats Joe Louis and Chuck Norris back to back, same evening. A couple of years later, Chuck Norris is dominating. A couple of years later, Joe Louis is dominating. And even before Mr. Steen, Mike Stone, one person dominating. You get up to about 71-ish to 73. You have 3 fighters. And I don't recall any other era that has had 3 fighters be the dominating factors. When they retired, actually they didn't retire, when they shifted over to full contact karate, and it came back up into fruition in about 79. Keith Vitale, the dominant winner. After Keith Vitale, Steve Anderson, the dominant winner. So to grow up during when the triumvirate were ruling roost, and they all were stylistically such different fighters. Stylistically very, very different. Yeah, it was. I just sit here and giggle inwardly about it, because it was such a terrific time.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
As we're going near the hour mark, I forget the gentleman's name, but he's from Europe. And the comment he made on the post earlier today was, it seems like you in America use the title professor for higher ranking martial arts and so forth. And I replied that I believe that's an Arnis thing, because that's sort of the art that I've seen it used. I know we don't use it in Hapkido and so forth. So could you address the title professor in the martial arts and how that's used?
Yeah, I think the term professor is used as an Americanism. So instead of having a Kyoshi and Hanshi and Shihan type of hierarchy set up, in America, you'd have, whether you use the term master, grandmaster, or, Mr., such as, people refer to Alan Steen as Mr. Steen. Okay, he's my senior. Steve Fisher would always refer to Mike Stone, Mr. Stone, Ed Parker, Mr. Parker. Now, for me, the title is not a self-appointed one, because I am hugely against self-appointed numerical rank and self-appointed titles. When I was awarded 7th Dan by the American Teachers Association of Martial Arts, the title professor came with the numerical rank. And personally, I like the term professor. I know that in two different arts, in Arnis and then also the 10th degree under Mr. Steen, I have the title of Grandmaster, but it's almost to a point. I can't say I hate when somebody calls me GM Dan. That's okay. You'll never hear me refer to myself as Grandmaster. It's one of those where that's a ways off. That's a ways off. Thank you for the props and so forth. But yeah, Professor, I've got a student who calls me Professor Dan. The kids call me Sir. Whenever I go to a seminar, I always tell them, whatever the house rules. If you call me Sensei, fine. You call me Sabanim, fine. And then to lighten things up, and I say, if you have an overdeveloped sense of propriety, you may call me Your Worship. That always brings a laugh, but it chills everybody down as to how to address me, because I go by tone of voice. I go by tone of voice and how they have the look in their eyes and how they approach. And more often than not, it's all good. So, but yeah, Europe, I think, has more of a like Japanese or Oriental Okinawan tradition base.
Right.
And in America, it's kind of, and the professor thing in Arnis, actually, Remy Presses used the term professor. But if you may even have this book, I think it's Koichi Tohei's first book on Aikido. If you look in there when he talks about Ueshiba, he calls him Professor Ueshiba. He doesn't call him O-sensei, Professor Ueshiba. I thought, oh, well, how interesting. Because he even titles that way in the Orient evolved, So for me, I think the one that sticks very nicely is Super Dan. That works well. But yeah, everybody else, I can't really intelligently comment on everybody else's titles because I don't know exactly where they come from, what they mean in their particular systems. I mean, you'll have Grandmaster, Senior Grandmaster, Founding Grandmaster, Great Grandmaster. Did I say Supreme Grandmaster? Maybe I said that. But anyway, the thing is that what do you know? Can you back it up? How do you teach the students, et cetera, et cetera? And I don't know who said this, but it's like, call me anything, but don't call me late for dinner.
Right. I've never been one big on titles. I mean, when I go down to teach in Florida, Thomas Gordon, who's the host there and has been doing that Korean Martial Art Festival for years, he knows I don't like titles. So he'll like, Master Brees, how you doing? But, when I go to Korea, we only used two titles when I was in Korea. It was Kwanjang-nim for the school owner and Sabonim for the, his main student who did a lot of the teaching.
Yeah.
When I go back and, kids or students are, they'll ask my instructor, what do we call the American? And he'll like Sabonim. And so they all call me Sabonim there because I'm his student under him. And I help teach the kids and stuff sometimes when I'm there in different classes. But I always liked, do you remember the movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen way back in the early 90s? I
remember it, but I didn't see it. I wasn't much of a Charlie Sheen fan.
I think it was Michael Biehn played the sniper, but on that Navy SEAL team.
Mm-hmm.
And his call sign in that movie was God. And so that's and me having just been out of the military and had been a sniper with the 2nd Infantry Division and used to teach at the 2nd ID Scout Sniper School there in Korea before I got out of the military. When that movie came out, I thought that's appropriate, so you can call me that.
Boy, if you say that in a mixed crowd, somebody's going to be offended.
That will, but if I'll have to, I could probably find the YouTube clip and send it to you. But it's funny because they'll be like on the call side, God, you got this, God, and he's up there with the sniper rifle, like, covering their position and helping them out.
Oh,
But
that's funny.
that was the
That is,
sniper
I like
call
that.
sign.
That is funny.
So, but yeah, you're right. Certain people might not like myself calling me that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I had, oh, geez. And luckily I've only had this once, but I had a student who was part of one of the many sects of Christianity that had, that didn't want to bow as they came on the floor because you only bow to the Lord. And, I'm one of the things that you might not know about me is I'm huge on religious freedom. Huge. I will get on a soapbox. I'll get a microphone. I'll thump somebody in the head with the microphone on that subject. And so, instead of going, well, you got to bow anyway because I'm the head of the school, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember. I think it was just stop, come to a dead stop, come to full attention, wait about a second. That would replicate the time it would take to bow and walk on the floor. And it was the same thing, which now this isn't that, but just recently I had a gender thing where I found out that, one of my female students, and I'm so old, I can't remember all this gender stuff, but did not want to be a her. Okay. And so when I spoke to her, I said, okay, well, I'm too old to change my ways. However, I'll meet you halfway. I will always refer to you by name. I will never speak to you by pronoun, by third person, etc. I will always use your name, and I'll do nothing but use your name. And this is where we can meet, because the other stuff is too it's too hard for me to remember. Plus, I speak the way that I speak. I will acknowledge your choice there, but you need to acknowledge that I use the language that I use. But I'll be reasonable, because I'm not going to change my speaking habits and patterns for everyone. But anyway, somebody calling you God because you're a sniper.
Yeah.
A little bit of touchy ground there.
Yeah, it is. But
Yeah.
I mean, and it is funny because I remember back in Korea when we were doing the Qigong class, Qigong Korean, Qigong Chinese.
Yeah.
But Kwanjang, making a point that there's nothing religious about this. This is not religion. This is health and so forth. Because, some people, sadly, they equate Tai Chi and Qigong and different things as a religious practice when it's not. Now, has it been influenced by Buddhism and Confucianism and so forth? Of course, all of Asia has been influenced by it, but it's not. But practicing those arts does not mean you are worshiping or belong to that particular religion.
Yeah, and let me throw an idea into your head, because this is something that I firmly believe, which is, okay, we all talk about martial arts, spirit, mind, body. Okay. Now, when I look at the spirit, I don't look at, here's my spirit. I'm going to put this over here. Spirit is what animates the meat motor. Okay. To me, spirit is me. Now, let's take something mundane as a comedy. When you start laughing and enjoying a comedy, what is it that benefits? Does it make your body feel good? Does it increase your intellect right away? No. You are amused. Okay, that comedy hit you on a spiritual level, not religious, but spiritual level. Okay, you get into, let's say, Qigong practice or Tai Chi or anything that affects you as you. Good, that affected you on a spiritual level. Now, that which you are affiliated with in terms of spiritual beliefs or religion, okay, they go like this, but they aren't necessarily the same. So let's say, hypothetically, I'm not a Buddhist. Okay, so I'll use Buddhism. Okay, you can have the concept of Buddhism as a spiritual philosophy, but then you can have the spiritual feeling over here of, I haven't seen my daughter in 4 years and I feel so good. I'm so happy to see her. Well, that's a spiritual event. Has nothing to do with Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Scientology, insert favorite religion here. But who's happy? Did my body all of a sudden go, my daughter just got here? Yes, yes, yes. I goosebumps. Did my mind all of a sudden elevate to higher degrees of knowledge and understanding? No, I felt good. So, yeah, you have something spiritually, it totally different, or somewhat different, at least from religion. Unfortunately, yeah, too many people collapse the two, so that, okay, good. Tai Chi is going to you're going to work on your Qigong through motion, which, okay, good. There's Tai Chi, Qigong through motion. Can't do that because ... No, yeah, there's a misunderstanding here. But there you go.
I agree, and that's a great way of putting that, spirituality, where it's not necessarily affiliated with doesn't have to be affiliated with religion. I mean, so
Right.
It's funny. Jeff said here he had a parent who didn't like him using the term bong with his son when practicing the bow staff. Thought that was funny and caught me off guard because in Korea, bong is the staff.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's the Korean term. Bong is your
Well,
staff.
that parent had probably been using a bong for different purposes.
Like,
Which why they disagreed with using bong with a staff.
Yeah, the don bong is the short little baton. So don bong, and then bong is the longer. So yeah, those are just Korean. It's just Korean words, but it has a different meaning in English. So
exactly. Yeah, and it's funny because we'll get into a little bit of ever so slight little bit of sociopolitics, and where 10, 15, 20 years ago, somebody would not have been offended by the term bong. They would have been able to differentiate the fact that this is called a Korean term and that other is something that you smoke pot through. Now, it's very hard to find somebody not offended about the smallest thing. And, unfortunately for this parent with not liking, the teacher using the term bong for the staff, it's kind of like, welcome to the new millennium. Welcome to, instead of touchy-feely, just plain touchy.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it just gets too overboard for some of that, and it gets ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, we've been going over an hour, so
again. I told you when we first met, if you got me talking, we'd be going. So there you go.
Any final thoughts you'd like to share with the folks? And if you want to promote something or a website you want them to visit or something, feel free to do that as well.
Yeah. Well, okay. Cheap commercial plug. I've got, tons of books and DVDs that I've put together over on the Super Dan online library. Basically, I would say that's the result of over 57 years work put down into either print or video. The other thing is that, and this is just kind of a generic thing, but whatever martial art that you're training in, and pretty much whatever reason, with exception of the intent to do others harm, it's all valid. There's a lot of criticism these days about the big push on BJJ and how it won't work in the street and blah, 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 blah. But the thing is that, if you enjoy it, if this is what sets off the light bulb over your head, bingo. Just very, very briefly, I was at a concert by a three-piece band called Tuner. And there's a Trey Gunn who's on bass, Marcus Reuter on touch guitar, and Pat Mastelotto on drums. Progressive rock, instrumental rock, just very, very rugged music. And I was talking with Trey afterwards, and I knew he had done Aikido. and he had gotten his black belt in Aikido. I said, so, you know, instead of being the fanboy asking about the music, I go, so you switched from Aikido to BJJ. How come? And he goes, well, you know, I'm doing Aikido and they're doing BJJ off to the side. And, you know, I wanted to get in there where, you know, I wanted to be tested further. I want to get out. I wanted to get in there and roll around with the guys. And I said, okay, so what about striking arts? You know, because he knew that I was a martial artist. And I said, well, you know, they have these certain striking arts there, but I've got to protect the hands. Now, he plays touch guitar, right? It's got, oh, totally understood. You know, but the thing is that, okay, this is what floats his boat. He's over there rolling around on the mat. He even, he starts jonesing. If they're on tour, he starts jonesing for rolling around on the mat if he's away from it for a couple of days because he loves it that much. Okay. Loving it that much is probably one of the most valid reasons for doing any martial art that you do. And so if I was going to impart anything to anybody that's watching is that if you're doing the art that you love, you're doing it right. If you're doing it for any reason, whether you like the group, it's a social thing, it's a health thing, it's a self-defense thing, it's physical research, or insert favorite reason here. If you're doing it for any of those reasons, other than the intent to go out and harm somebody, that is a valid reason. And don't let anybody ever attempt to persuade you otherwise. What you're doing is what you're doing. Carry on.
And that is an awesome thought to end with. So I really appreciate that, Dan. I appreciate you joining us here again. Maybe we'll do a third one when we get here in a little while. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for your time. Thank you, Jeff Miller, for doing some comments and watching for the whole show. Thank you to everybody who watches replays or listening to the podcast. Be sure to go look up Dan's website. More books and videos, and you'll be able to take in all at once. You might have to go there a couple times, buy them in little groups, and
spend lavishly. Spend lavishly.
But thank you, everybody.
Well, thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me on again. And
thank you.
And I'll return.
Everybody go make it a fantastic Friday, and we will see you tomorrow.
You betcha.